Chapter 1: The Overnight Nurse. I worked night shifts at a long-term care facility for 6 years. I want to be clear about what kind of place it was. Not a hospital, not a hospice, but a residential care home for elderly patients who needed full-time assistance. Most of them had been there for years. I knew their names, their habits, which ones slept through the night, and which ones didn't. After 6 years on nights, I knew that building the way, you only know a place you've spent thousands of dark hours in. The incident I'm going to tell you about happened in my 4th year, on a Tuesday night in February. We had a patient in room 7, I'll call her Margaret, who had been with us for almost 3 years. She was in her late 80s, mostly bedridden, and had moderate dementia. She was not a difficult patient. She slept most of the night, occasionally called out for her sister, who had died decades earlier and needed to be checked every 2 hours. Standard. At 2 a.m., I did my rounds. Room 7, Margaret, sleeping. Everything normal. I noted it in the log and continued. At 3:15 a.m., the call light for room 7 came on. I went immediately. Margaret was awake, sitting up in bed, which was unusual because she rarely had the strength to sit unassisted, and she was looking at the corner of the room near the window. Not at me when I came in, at the corner. I asked her if she was all right. She said, without looking at me, "She's been here all night." I looked at the corner, empty. I told her there was nobody there, and she shook her head slowly and said, "She's standing right there. She's been waiting." I stayed with Margaret for about 20 minutes, talking quietly, until she settled back to sleep. I noted the incident in the log as patient experienced confusion, possible hallucination, settled without intervention. Standard language for that kind of thing. What I didn't note in the log, because I didn't know how to, was what happened when I turned off her light and stood for a moment in the doorway before leaving. The room was dark except for the glow of the parking lot lights through the curtain, and in that dim light in the corner near the window where Margaret had been looking, the temperature was different. Not dramatically, not a horror movie cold, just different. A few degrees cooler than the rest of the room, in a space roughly the size and shape of a person standing still. I stood in that doorway for longer than I needed to. Then I went back to the nurse's station and sat down and didn't go back to room 7 until my next scheduled check at 4 a.m. Margaret died 11 days later on a Tuesday night. I wasn't on shift. The colleague who has told me the next day that Margaret had been awake at 3 a.m. and had seemed peaceful, more peaceful than usual, she said. She had been looking at the corner of the room. I've thought about what Margaret saw in that corner for a long time. I've thought about whether it was her sister, or something else entirely, or nothing at all. I've worked nights long enough to know that the line between those 3 possibilities gets harder to see the closer you get to 3 a.m. Chapter 2: The Gas Station. My cousin worked the overnight shift at a gas station off a state highway in rural Georgia for about 8 months before he quit. He's not the kind of person who quits things. He worked that job through 2 hurricanes and a robbery, neither of which was enough to make him leave. What made him leave was quieter than both of those things, and it took longer to understand. The gas station was open 24 hours. Between midnight and 5 a.m., he was alone, no other employees, just him behind the counter, the hum of the refrigerators, and the occasional customer pulling off the highway for gas or cigarettes or coffee. Most nights he'd see maybe 15 people between midnight and 5 a.m., some nights fewer. The strange thing started about 3 months in. A man began coming in every night at 3:30 a.m. Same time, give or take a few minutes. He drove a dark sedan that my cousin couldn't identify the make of from behind the counter. He always bought the same thing, a black coffee from the machine by the door and a pack of gum, always the same brand. He always paid cash. He never said anything beyond what was necessary to complete the transaction. He was unremarkable in every way except one. He was always completely dry. This sounds like nothing, But in rural Georgia, walking from your car to the door of a gas station involves crossing about 30 feet of parking lot. On rainy nights, and there were many, every other customer came in with wet shoulders, wet hair, damp shoes. This man never did. Not once. In the 3 months he came in, on any night regardless of the weather. My cousin noticed it for the first time on a particularly heavy rain night when the man walked in from the parking lot looking as though it wasn't raining at all. He went back and checked the security camera. The parking lot was dark with rain. The man's car was in the lot. He had walked from the car to the door. He was completely dry. My cousin started paying closer attention. He started noting the weather on nights the man came in. Over the following 6 weeks, he logged 11 rainy nights. The man came in on 9 of them, every time, completely dry. He also noticed that on the camera footage, the transition from the parking lot to the door seemed to take less time than it should. Not dramatically less, just slightly less, as if a few frames were missing. He tried asking once, just a casual comment, rough night out there, to see if the man would acknowledge the rain. The man looked at him for a moment with an expression my cousin described as not quite right, as if the face was doing something it had learned to do rather than something it felt. Then he took his coffee and his gum and left. My cousin stopped working nights 2 weeks later. He told his manager it was a scheduling conflict. He told me the truth, which was simpler. He had decided he didn't want to be alone in that building at 3:30 a.m. anymore. Whatever came through that door every night, whatever stayed dry in the rain and moved slightly faster than it should, he had decided it wasn't worth the hourly rate to find out what it was. Chapter 3. The Security Desk. I monitored security cameras for a commercial office complex for 2 years. 12 buildings, hundreds of cameras, 1 desk, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It was the kind of job that sounds more interesting than it is. Mostly you watch empty hallways and parking lots, and the occasional raccoon trigger a motion alert. In 2 years, I had exactly 3 genuine security incidents, all of them mundane. The work was almost entirely routine. Almost. The camera I want to tell you about was camera 47, a fixed-angle camera mounted in the stairwell of Building 6, covering the landing between the 3rd and 4th floors. It was one of the less interesting cameras. Nothing ever happened in that stairwell. I probably looked at it directly maybe twice a night, briefly, as part of my rotation. In my 14th month, I noticed something during a routine check. On camera 47, at 2:58 a.m., a man was standing on the 3rd floor landing. He was facing the camera, completely still. He was wearing what looked like office clothing, button-down shirt, dark trousers. He was not supposed to be there. Building 6 was locked and empty. Access required a keycard and a code, and no access had been logged that night. I called the on-site guard and sent him to the 3rd floor stairwell of Building 6. While he was on his way, I kept my eyes on camera 47. The man did not move. He stood completely still on the landing, facing the camera, for the 4 minutes it took the guard to reach the stairwell. The guard's radio crackled when he entered the building. I told him, 3rd floor landing, camera 47. I watched on the monitor as the guard appeared on camera 46, the camera covering the approach to the stairwell door, pushed through the door, and climbed into frame on camera 47. The landing was empty. The man was gone. In the moment between the guard opening the stairwell door, which I saw on camera 46, and appearing on the landing on camera 47, the man had vanished. There was nowhere to go. The stairwell above and below was visible on adjacent cameras. Nothing moved on any of them. The guard checked the floor thoroughly. Nothing. No sign of entry. No sign of anyone having been there. He filed a report noting possible camera artifact or reflection. I filed the same. But here's the part 1 I've never been able to explain away. When I pulled the full footage from camera 47 for that night to attach to the incident report, I found something I hadn't noticed in real time. The man had been standing on that landing since 11:47 p.m. for 3 hours and 11 minutes before I noticed him. 3 hours of standing completely still in an empty stairwell facing a camera in the dark. I don't know what he was waiting for. I don't know why he left when the guard came. I don't know what would have happened if I had noticed him at 11:47 p.m. instead of 2:58 a.m. I transferred to a day shift position 4 months later. I told HR I needed a change for personal reasons. That was true enough. I still think about camera 47. I still think about what 3 hours of standing in the dark means. I think about it most on nights when I can't sleep, when I find myself watching the shadows in my own room and wondering how long something could stand completely still before you'd notice it was there.